Hello, Berkman kiddos. It's Miss Rayborn here. Now that we read our book, Maybe Something Beautiful, we are going to work together as a community to make some artwork to share in the halls of Berkman. You got a beautiful paper bag that was sent home with you that has some supplies in it. There's a roll of paper. There is a really amazing paint palette of paints. There is an extra paintbrush because we're gonna work together. There's one paintbrush in here, but I want you to work with a friend, a buddy, a family member, anybody who's there with you in your community that you would like to paint with. So you have two paintbrushes so that you can hopefully work with a partner or a buddy. And you also have a black oil pastel, and I'm gonna show you what that's for here in just a second. You will also need to get yourself a little cup of water, okay, for painting with later. So when you unroll your papers, you might notice that your papers might be a little like crinkled or squished. That's okay. We can just flatten them out with our hand, or sometimes I like to, if it's kind of curly, I just turn it over to the other side so that the curly part is down. Now, before I am ready to paint, I'm gonna first draw with my black oil pastel. Some people like to draw with pencil first. It's up to you. I just wanna show you something special. So for now, I'm just gonna draw, I think I'm gonna draw a really beautiful heart that has some patterns in it because after reading that story, my heart just feels kind of full. That story was so joyful and really wonderful. So I drew a heart with some sort of bubbly patterns in it because I want to make it super, super colorful. Now, we have an oil pastel to draw with because something great is going to happen with your watercolors that we're going to work with here in a minute. An oil pastel is sort of like a crayon, but it has more oil in it so that it creates a reaction with your watercolors. Let me show you what I mean. So I've got my cup of water, and I've got my paint palette, and I've got my paintbrush. Now, for me to wake up my paints, I have to get my paintbrush wet first, okay? These kinds of paints, you need to sort of tickle the top of your paint. I'm hoping that you can see that, to kind of wake them up. You've probably used paints like this with Miss Altenberger before. So I'm getting lots of water on my paintbrush, and then I'm just tickling the top of my paints to wake up my paints and to get some paint on my brush. As you can see, I've got quite a bit. Now, when I start to paint, my favorite thing about using oil pastel and watercolor is that I can paint patterns with my colors of my oil pastel and watercolor because the oil and the water do not like each other. They're gonna push away from each other. So I painted some red dots. I'm gonna get all these little dots here, the littlest ones, and make them red. Now I'm gonna rinse out my paintbrush really well. I want all that red off my paintbrush. And I'm gonna pick a color that's pretty different. I think I'm gonna go all the way over here to this yellow. So I have a super clean paintbrush, that's important. And I'm gonna start tickling the top of my yellow paint because I want lots of nice, bright, light yellow. And I'm looking to see on my paintbrush, how am I doing? Am I getting enough yellow on there? Tickling the top and just sort of rubbing and scrubbing. So I've got a paintbrush full of yellow. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a little loop of yellow, like a circle inside of a circle around my red. Now, do you notice how those are not mixing together? We know that yellow and red make orange, but in this case, they're not mixing together. That's happening because the oil in the oil pastel that I drew with is keeping them from touching because we said that the oil in the oil pastel will push away from the water in the watercolor. So I'm gonna add one more color to this. I'm gonna rinse out my paintbrush so it's really, really, really nice and clean. And then I think I'm gonna go with some purple, a really bright color that is a contrast, meaning it's very different than yellow. Yellow is quite light and purple is pretty dark. And I'm gonna paint the inside of my heart, and notice that it's not mixing or blending with my red because, again, the black oil pastel, the oil in the oil pastel is pushing away from the water in the watercolor. So I can make this really beautiful patterned design without having to worry about my colors mixing. So I cannot wait to see what kinds of incredible things you will make with your family and your community. Remember that you have 3 pieces of paper, you have 2 paintbrushes, you have an oil pastel to share, and I'm really hoping you will make an amazing piece of artwork. Here is the painting that Miss R painted just a little while ago, that I was inspired by the book, by all the beautiful patterns, and the message I wanted to share with our community was bloom where you're planted. And I also did that in Spanish on one side because our community is dual language. We speak both English and Spanish, so I wanted to include our whole community. And I'm really excited to bring this painting with me back to school on Monday because we're going to show them off and share them with our community and display them in the hallway. So these beautiful paints that are left over are for you, and I hope you will keep painting with them for a long time to come. Remember that you've got extra supplies, paper and paintbrushes, so that you can work with a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a friend from your community, anybody around you, okay? So remember to bring your beautiful paintings with you to school on Monday so we can share with our community. I cannot wait to see what you make. Bye for now.